The townsfolk hurled their contempt at him in the central plaza as a young woman whose life he'd rescued looked on with dismay from the cathedral entrance. Silas McGrath remained motionless, his weather hat clutched in his calloused palms, while Cedar Ridge's upstanding citizens cast their condemnation upon him like projectiles. His clothing remained ripped from the recent altercation, dry crimson staining his fingers from defending her dignity mere hours earlier, yet they now branded him as the wrongdoer. The early daylight blazed over the principal thoroughfare when Sheriff Donovan advanced, his star gleaming in illumination. "You possess no authority, McGrath. Absolutely no authority to assault those individuals," he declared. The assembly voiced their concurrence, their expressions contorted with sanctimonious fury. Silas gazed beyond the crowd toward Evangelene Porter's position on the cathedral steps. Her azure gown appeared immaculate now, her aureate locks precisely plaited. She appeared to be 19, perhaps 20, possessing eyes resembling a winter firmament. The identical eyes that had implored him for assistance when 3 wanderers trapped her near Mackenzie's mercantile establishment at daybreak. Those men intended to violate her, Silas stated softly, his words resonating throughout the plaza. "I performed what any honorable gentleman would accomplish." Elderly Mrs. Hartwell forced her way through the assembly, her walking stick striking the timber boardwalk. "Honorable? You nearly killed those individuals. And for what purpose? To tarnish that unfortunate maiden standing." She directed her twisted digit toward Evangeline. "Observe her, alone with someone like you in darkness. What conclusions will society reach?" The accusation struck more forcefully than any physical blow. Silas had completed 3 years of military service, mourned his sibling at Gettysburg, and constructed his homestead through his own laborious efforts. Yet standing in that square, with the entire community regarding him as something contaminated, he experienced diminishment beyond anything previously endured. Pastor Williams appeared from the cathedral, his dark garment flowing in the morning wind. "Mr. McGrath, your motivations might have been noble, but damnation's pathway is constructed with such virtuous intentions. You've generated a controversy that will pursue Miss Porter throughout her existence." Silas observed Evangeline once more. She hadn't uttered a single word since he transported her to safety. Her mouth remained compressed, her hands positioned in her lap, yet something resided in her gaze. Not humiliation, not terror, but something entirely different. The crowd advanced closer. Someone bellowed, "We should expel you from our settlement." Another individual proclaimed, "Respectable people reject your presence here." However, what they remained ignorant of, what none could possibly comprehend, was that Evangelene Porter harbored mystery that would transform everything. Within 24 hours, these identical individuals expressing disdain for Silas McGrath would plead for his pardon. The maiden on the cathedral steps finally rose, adjusting her garment. When she regarded Silas, her eyes contained a vow that accelerated his pulse while simultaneously chilling his blood. Projectiles arrived initially, followed by spoiled produce. Silas evaded as a fragment of hardened earth flew past his ear, striking the cathedral barrier behind him. The assembly had grown more audacious, their murmurs transforming into exclamations, their disapproval becoming something more malevolent. "Depart from our community." Mayor Hutchkins roared, his rotund countenance crimson from strain. "We require no assistance from your variety." Silas removed egg residue from his shoulder, his jaw tightly clenched. He confronted Confederate assaults at Bull Run, challenged Apache raiding parties across the frontier, yet nothing had equipped him for this, being destroyed by the very individuals he'd pledged to safeguard. Evangeline ascended from cathedral steps, her movements elegant despite the turmoil. She approached the crowd with her chin elevated proudly, and momentarily the shouting subsided. "Please," she spoke, her voice resonating like cathedral chimes. "Mr. McGrath, preserve my existence. Those individuals intended to—" "Silence yourself, child," Mrs. Hartwell interjected, brandishing her cane. "You're unaware of your statements. The trauma has confused your reasoning." "But he rescued me," Evangeline persisted, approaching Silas's location. They possessed blades and spoke horrific threats. Had he not arrived precisely when he did? Sheriff Donovan expelled saliva into the earth. "That's precisely the issue, girl. How fortuitous that McGrath happened to be lurking near the establishment at dawn. Perhaps he collaborated with those drifters. Perhaps this entire incident was orchestrated. The allegation impacted Silas like a physical assault. His hands formed fists, but he compelled himself to remain motionless. Combat would merely validate their accusations. That's a complete falsehood, he declared through clenched teeth. Language, Pastor Williams exclaimed. You observe. This exemplifies precisely the individual we're confronting. Violent, crude, impious. Young Tommy Fletcher, barely 16 and attempting to impress his elders, retrieved another stone. My father claims individuals like you exploit innocent females. He says you likely orchestrated everything to approach her. The rock struck Silas's chest, and something within him fractured. He advanced one step, and the crowd instinctively retreated. Momentarily, the war manifested in his eyes. The violence he committed, the blood he'd shed, the darkness inhabiting every warrior's spirit. I battle for this nation, he stated, his voice lethally quiet. I bled for it, sacrificed everything for it. This represents your gratitude for that sacrifice. Yet even as he spoke, he could perceive it in their expressions. They no longer listened. Their decisions were finalized. He represented the antagonists in their narrative, and nothing he declared would alter that perception. What none observed was a subtle smile gracing Evangelene's lips, or how her fingers outlined something concealed beneath her dress, something that would arrive with dawn's light, carrying sufficient force to transform their righteous indignation into trembling apologies. By midday, they'd reduced his reputation to cinders and dispersed it to the wind. Silas sat isolated in Murphy's Tavern, the sole establishment in Cedar Ridge that continued serving him. The barkeeper, One-Eyed Pete, slid whiskey across the scarred wooden counter without speaking. Even Pete's hospitality carried a cost. He charged Silas double and required him to consume his drink in the rear corner, distant from the windows. I've heard they're discussing forming a committee, Pete muttered, polishing a glass with a soiled cloth. The town council convenes tonight to address your circumstances. Silas consumed the whiskey, experiencing its burn descending his throat. Let them deliberate. But the truth gnawed at him like a famished wolf. He performed righteously, rescued a maiden from a fate exceeding death, yet somehow became a monster in their tale. The 3 drifters he repelled had disappeared like vapor, abandoning town before sunrise had completed. How convenient. The tavern doors swung open, and Sheriff Donovan strutted inside, his hand positioned on his weapon belt. Behind him came Mayor Hutchkins and 2 additional council members, their faces displaying grim resolve. McGrath, Donovan announced, his voice carrying official authority. The town council has determined you're unwelcome here. You have until sunset to gather your belongings and depart. Silas rose slowly, his chair scraping against a wooden floor. This remains America, last I've verified. A man possesses a right to reside wherever he chooses. Not when he threatens decent people. Mayor Hutchkins wheezed, his jowls trembling with outrage. That unfortunate girl's reputation is destroyed because of you. Her marriage prospects, her community standing, all ruined by your reckless heroism. Her reputation, Silas laughed bitterly. 3 men were preparing to violate and murder her, but certainly, let's concern ourselves with her reputation. Councilman Bradley stepped forward, his thin mustache twitching. The girl claims you rescued her, yes, but witnesses observed you alone with her afterward, behind the store in darkness for nearly an hour. The insinuation lingered in the atmosphere like gun smoke. Silas felt his face flush with anger. I was ensuring her safety, confirming those beasts had truly departed. Ensuring something that's certain, Donovan sneered. One-Eyed Pete cleared his throat nervously. Perhaps you gentlemen should conduct this discussion outside. I prefer avoiding trouble in my establishment. But trouble had already discovered them. Through the tavern's grimy windows, Silas could observe a crowd assembling in the street. Men, women, even children, all staring at the tavern as if it were a den of corruption. Evangelene stood among them, her golden hair capturing the afternoon sunlight, but she wasn't regarding the tavern with hatred like the others. She was observing the horizon, her hand shielding her eyes as if anticipating something. You have 1 hour. Donovan declared, adjusting his gun belt. 1 hour to arrange your affairs and depart Cedar Ridge. Don't complicate this unnecessarily. As the men departed the tavern, Silas glimpsed Evangelene through the window again. This time she was smiling, not the modest smile of a rescued maiden, but something sharper, something that spoke of secrets and power and a reckoning approaching Cedar Ridge on hoofbeats that would shake the very earth beneath their feet. The telegram transformed everything. Evangelene Porter entered the telegraph office at 3 o'clock, her blue dress rustling against the wooden floor. Old Samuel Morse looked up from his apparatus, his thick spectacles sliding down his nose. Miss Porter, what brings you here? After this morning's events, you should be resting. She placed a silver coin on the counter, more currency than Samuel typically observed in a week. I must send a message. Urgent priority. Samuel's eyebrows elevated as he read the address she inscribed. General Augustus Porter, Fort Richardson, Texas. Porter, he stammered. You're related to General Porter? The Augustus Porter? Evangeline's smile resembled ice and steel. He's my father. The blood evacuated Samuel's face. General Porter commanded the entire Texas military district, controlled over 3,000 cavalry troops, and possessed the governor's attention. Men who opposed Augustus Porter had a tendency to vanish into the desert, never to be discovered again. The message, sir, Evangeline stated calmly. Samuel's hands trembled as he prepared the telegraph key. Her words were brief, precise, and terrifying. Attempted assault prevented by local rancher. Town persecuting hero. Require immediate escort. Departing tomorrow at dawn. Evangeline. As the message transmitted through the wires, Evangeline turned toward the window. Across the street, she could observe Silas McGrath loading his meager possessions into a deteriorated wagon. The sight caused her stomach to twist with something that might have been guilt. Miss Porter, Samuel whispered, does your father know you're in Cedar Ridge? He knows exactly where I am, she replied. And after today, he'll know precisely how his daughter was treated by the good people of this town. The truth was darker than anyone suspected. Evangeline hadn't been traveling alone when those drifters attacked her. She'd been fleeing an arranged marriage to a brutal cattle baron named Marcus Thorne, a man her father had chosen for political reasons. The attack had been genuine, the danger real, but her presence in Cedar Ridge was no coincidence. She'd been hiding here for 3 days, working as a seamstress to earn her sustenance, hoping to disappear into the anonymous crowd of a small frontier town. But when those men cornered her behind the store, when Silas McGrath fought like a demon to preserve her life, everything changed. Now the town's cruelty toward her savior had provided her the perfect weapon against her father's plans. Through the window, she watched Mayor Hutchkins approach Silas with a smug expression, probably delivering additional threats about departing town. Neither man noticed the dust cloud on the horizon, still small but growing larger. Mr. Morse, she said sweetly, I think you should understand something else. My father doesn't respond favorably to threats against his family, and he particularly dislikes it when good men are punished for protecting what belongs to him. Samuel dropped his spectacles. If you were Evangeline, what would you do? Tell the town the truth now and risk losing your advantage, or let them dig themselves deeper into a hole they'd never escape? Tell me in the comments. I need to know which side you choose, because what Evangeline decided next would determine whether Cedar Ridge faced justice or complete destruction. The dust cloud on the horizon was expanding. She chose silence, and with it sealed Cedar Ridge's fate. By 4 o'clock, word spread through town like wildfire. Samuel Morse, despite Evangeline's implied threats, couldn't contain his secret. The knowledge burned within him like fever until he finally whispered to his wife, who informed her sister, who told the preacher's wife, who ran directly to Mayor Hutchkins. General Porter's daughter, Hutchkins repeated, his face becoming the color of aged parchment. Are you certain? Mrs. Williams nodded vigorously, her bonnet bobbing. Samuel swears it's true. She sent a telegram to Fort Richardson herself, and the way she regarded him when she said it, Lord have mercy on our souls. The mayor staggered backward, nearly stumbling over his own feet. General Augustus Porter was a legend in Texas, a man who destroyed the Comanche resistance, who'd executed rustlers without trial, who'd once commanded an entire Apache village, burned to ground for stealing a single horse. And they'd just spent the morning humiliating the man who'd saved his daughter's life. Meanwhile, Silas McGrath completed loading his wagon. Unaware that his exile had just become his salvation, he patted his elderly horse's neck, checking the harness one final time. Everything he owned fit in that wagon's rear. A few garments, his rifle, a photograph of his deceased brother, and the worn Bible his mother had given him before she died. Departing already? He turned to find Evangelene approaching, her hands clasped behind her back. Up close, she was even more beautiful than he'd realized, but there was something sharp in her eyes that hadn't been present that morning. The town council made their feelings clear, Silas said quietly. I reckon it's best for everyone if I move on. Best for everyone? She tilted her head, studying his face. Mr. McGrath, do you know who I am? A young lady who encountered trouble and needed help. That's all that mattered to me. Something flickered across her features. Surprise, perhaps, or disappointment. And if I told you that helping me might have consequences? Big consequences. Silas shrugged, climbing onto the wagon seat. Already experiencing consequences, miss. But I'd do it again. Some things are worth more than a man's reputation. She watched him gather the reins, her expression unreadable. My father's coming, Mr. McGrath. He'll be here by dawn. Your father? General Augustus Porter, Texas Military District. She let the words hang in the air like a loaded weapon. He doesn't take kindly to people who hurt his family, and after today, he's going to consider this entire town guilty of that crime. Silas felt his blood turn to ice water. He'd heard the stories about General Porter, the mass executions, the burned homesteads, the unmarked graves scattered across West Texas. The man didn't just dispense justice, he delivered apocalypse. Why are you telling me this? Evangelene stepped closer to the wagon, her voice dropping to a whisper. Because in about 6 hours, this town is going to realize what they've done. And when they do, they're going to come begging for you to save them again. If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel. The sound of galloping horses echoed from the distance, still faint but growing stronger. Evangelene smiled, and for the first time since that morning, it wasn't sweet or innocent. It was the smile of a woman who held the power of life and death in her delicate hands, and she was about to squeeze. They came with the sunrise like an army of judgment. 100 cavalry soldiers crested the hill above Cedar Ridge at dawn, their sabers gleaming in the early light, their horses snorting clouds of steam in the cool morning air. At their head rode General Augustus Porter himself, 6 feet of weathered steel and controlled fury, his gray beard braided with silver threads, his eyes the color of winter storms. The thunder of their approach awakened the entire town. People stumbled from their beds, pulling on clothes, peering through windows at the military force descending upon them like divine wrath itself. Mayor Hutchins stood in the middle of Main Street in his nightgown, his mouth agape as the cavalry formed a perfect line across the town's width. The horses stamped and snorted, their riders silent as tombstones, their rifles held ready. General Porter dismounted with the fluid grace of a man born to the saddle. His boots struck the dirt with finality, each step echoing like a judge's gavel as he walked toward a terrified crowd gathering in the street. Where's my daughter? His voice carried the authority of cannon fire. Evangelene stepped out from behind the church, no longer the helpless maiden they'd seen yesterday. Now she moved with the confidence of a woman who knew exactly how much power flowed in her veins. She walked straight to her father and kissed his cheek. Hello, Papa. Evangelene. His eyes never left the crowd as he spoke to her. Are you hurt? No, thanks to Mr. McGrath. The general's gaze swept over the townspeople like a scythe through wheat. Sheriff Donovan tried to step forward, his hand hovering near his gun, but stopped when 50 rifle barrels swung toward him. I understand, General Porter said, his voice carrying to every corner of the square, that you good people saw fit to punish the man who saved my daughter's life. General, sir, Mayor Hutchins stammered, there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't know she was. Didn't know she was what? Human? Worthy of protection. The general's hand rested on his saber hilt. Or are you saying you would have treated her differently if you'd known her blood? Pastor Williams found his courage first. stepping forward with his Bible clutched against his chest. General Porter. We were only thinking of the young lady's reputation in a small town like ours. Her reputation? The general's laugh was like ice cracking. My daughter's reputation is that she's alive. Everything else is commentary. Behind the general, his soldiers sat motionless in their saddles, but their presence spoke louder than any threat. These were men who'd fought Apaches, who'd survived the desert, who'd followed Augustus Porter through hell and back, and every one of them was ready to burn Cedar Ridge to the ground if their commander gave the word. Where the general asked quietly, "Is Silas McGrath?" The question hung in the air like smoke from a funeral pyre, and every person in Cedar Ridge suddenly realized they were standing on the wrong side of history. The hunt for redemption began with a desperate race against time. Sheriff Donovan's voice cracked like a teenage boy's. "General, sir, McGrath left town yesterday evening. Headed north toward Austin, I believe." General Porter's eyes narrowed to slits. "You drove him out." We thought it was best for everyone concerned," Mayor Hutchins whimpered. The general turned to his daughter, and for the first time since arriving, his voice softened. "Tell me what happened, Evangelene. All of it." Standing there in the morning sun, surrounded by armed cavalry in a terrified town, Evangelene told her story. She spoke of the three drifters who cornered her behind the general store, of their knives and their threats, of how Silas McGrath had appeared like an avenging angel and fought them off with nothing but his fists and his fury. "He saved my life, Papa, and they called him a villain for it." When she finished, the silence stretched like a hangman's rope. General Porter walked a slow circle around the gathered townspeople, studying their faces the way a wolf studies sheep. "Captain Morrison," he called to one of his officers. "Yes, sir." "How many men does it take to burn a town this size?" The captain didn't hesitate. 20 should do it, sir. Maybe 30 if we want to be thorough." Several women in the crowd began to weep. Children clung to their mothers' skirts. Strong men who'd talked tough yesterday now looked ready to faint. "Please, General," Pastor Williams begged, falling to his knees. "We made a mistake, a terrible mistake. But surely the good Lord teaches forgiveness." "The good Lord," General Porter interrupted, "also teaches that ye shall reap what you sow, and what you people sowed yesterday was cruelty toward a hero." Old Mrs. Hartwell, who'd been among the loudest voices calling for Silas's exile, pushed through the crowd with her cane. "What do you want from us, General? Tell us how to make this right." General Porter stopped pacing and faced the crowd. "I want Silas McGrath brought back to this town. I want him treated with the respect he deserves. And I want every one of you to understand that the man you humiliated yesterday is worth more than this entire settlement." "But he's gone," Donovan protested. "Could be anywhere by now." "Then you'd better find him," the general said. "Because if Silas McGrath isn't standing in this square by sundown, I'm going to assume this town is beyond redemption." The threat hung in the air like smoke from a distant fire. Some of the cavalrymen had already dismounted and were checking their weapons, their faces set with grim purpose. Mayor Hutchins stumbled forward, his nightgown billowing around his pale legs. "We'll find him, General. Send out search parties right away. Bring him back safe and sound." "You'll do better than that," General Porter said. "You'll bring him back with honor. And when you do, every man, woman, and child in this town will apologize to him personally." As the townspeople scattered to organize search parties, Evangelene approached her father. "Papa, there's something else you should know. I wasn't just traveling when those men attacked me. I was running away." The general's expression softened slightly. "From Marcus Thorne?" She nodded. "I can't marry him, Papa. I won't." For a moment, the fearsome general looked like nothing more than a worried father, but only for a moment. Then the steel returned to his eyes as he watched the people of Cedar Ridge prepare to hunt for the man they'd wronged. Time was running out, and somewhere on the vast Texas plains, Silas McGrath was riding farther away from his salvation with every passing hour. They found him just as the sun touched the horizon and brought him back like a conquering hero. Silas McGrath rode into Cedar Ridge at the head of a procession that would be talked about for generations. Mayor Hutchins and Sheriff Donovan flanked him on horseback, their faces showing the desperate relief of men who'd stared death in the face and lived to tell about it. Behind them came half the town on foot, walking in respectful silence. The other half waited in the square, every man, woman, and child who'd cursed his name now standing with heads bowed in shame. General Porter stood beside his daughter, watching as a man who'd saved Evangelene's life dismounted in the exact spot where they'd humiliated him 24 hours before. Silas looked older somehow, worn down by a day of exile and the bitter taste of injustice. "Mr. McGrath," the general said, stepping forward with his hand extended. "I am General Augustus Porter, and I owe you a debt that can never be fully repaid." Silas took the offered hand, his callous fingers meeting the general's firm grip. "No debt, sir. I did what any decent man would do. But these people," the general gestured toward the crowd, "they punish you for your decency. Tell me, what would be fitting justice for such behavior?" The square fell silent except for the sound of horses breathing and leather creaking. Every eye was on Silas McGrath, waiting to see if he would demand their destruction or show them mercy they didn't deserve. Silas looked around at the faces that had been so full of hatred yesterday. Mrs. Hartwelder Kane, young Tommy Fletcher, who'd thrown stones, Pastor Williams, who condemned him from the church steps. They all waited for his judgment. "General," Silas said finally, "these people made a mistake, a bad one, but I reckon they've learned from it. Sometimes a man's got to fall down hard before he learns to stand upright." The relief that swept through the crowd was almost visible. Children began to cry with joy. Women sobbed into their husbands' shoulders, and grown men wiped tears from their weathered faces. One by one, they came forward. Mayor Hutchkins was first, his voice breaking as he apologized. Sheriff Donovan followed, taking off his badge and offering it to Silas as a gesture of respect. Mrs. Hartwell could barely speak through her tears, but she managed to whisper her regret. Even young Tommy Fletcher stepped up, his eyes red with shame, to ask forgiveness for the stones he'd thrown. General Porter watched it all with approval, but his attention kept drifting to his daughter and the way she looked at Silas McGrath, not with the gratitude of a rescued maiden, but with something deeper and more dangerous. "Mr. McGrath," Evangelene said as the last apology was given, "would you consider staying in Cedar Ridge? I think this town could use a man like you." Silas smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from him since the ordeal began. "I reckon I might, Miss Porter. This place is starting to grow on me." If you're enjoying the story, subscribe to the channel. The sun set on Cedar Ridge that evening with Silas McGrath standing tall in the town square. No longer an exile, but a hero finally recognized. General Porter offered him a position with the cavalry, but Silas chose to stay and rebuild his life among the people who'd learned to see past their prejudices. He married Evangelene Porter 6 months later, and their wedding was attended by every soul in Cedar Ridge, not out of obligation, but out of genuine love for the man who taught them the true meaning of courage. Sheriff Donovan retired and convinced Silas to take his place, where he served with honor for 20 years. The three drifters who'd started it all were never seen again, but rumors said they'd met their end trying to rob a cavalry peril outside of El Paso. As for Cedar Ridge, it became known throughout Texas as a town where heroes were honored and good men never walked alone. Now click on the video on the screen to hear a story even better than this one, with a twist so powerful it will leave you breathless.